That should not be on. Welcome back, everyone, to Get the Mic. I didn't realize I was still on. Oh well, it's taken care of now, everyone. Welcome back. I hope everyone is ready for our weekly random day of the week episode, because we're gonna have a good time with it. It's the grand final, so it'll be quite interesting.
I'm really excited to get into this one.
This is Get the Mic. I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And in this show, we dissect the mythological meaning of fiction. As usual, today we're talking about Dragon Ball, and as I just said, we're talking about the grand finals today, which is Master Roshi versus Goku.
Jackie Chun versus Goku.
Yes. Now, I think we can just get straight into it.
Yeah, do you have any cleanup from the last episode? I think we were pretty concise on it.
I think we were. The only thing, I have some stuff to say about Goku's tail, but that'll happen in this episode.
Yeah, we can address that.
Because it'll come up. It's just gonna come up. As you can see on our left there, we do have a little update. Our socials. If you want to join our Discord, please put in that link there. That bit.ly will get you to our YouTube channel, and our Twitter handle is Get the Mic Cast. The official.
Slowly but surely integrating all of this.
We are trying our best. So hope you guys enjoy it. But let's go ahead and start the show. So, first thing we see, it's really because they set it up pretty well in the last episode. At the end of the last episode, after Goku defeats Nam, the stage is set for Roshi and Goku to start their bout. In fact, they're like 10 minutes is going to be till the next match. So they're already getting ready for it here. And so the first thing we see is kind of the same interview process that we saw with Goku and Krillin earlier, except this time it's Goku and Jackie Chun. Now, it's interesting here that neither of them really give significant answers to the interview, but this is kind of just setting the stage for the battle. This is kind of before we've started with the match. Anything you want to say here, Brok?
Yeah, I like the interview because he interviews Goku, and Goku's kind of exercising and working out whenever he interviews him. And he asks what his strategy is going to be, and he says, basically, I just need to go as hard as I can. That's the only thing that I can do. And the Japanese translation of it says, the announcer says, it is this same unselfishness that must have allowed him to win his way this far, which is kind of the theme of what's been going on, right? It's his unselfishness. It's like his willingness to be wrong and to adjust and try his best instead of kind of getting in his own way, right?
It's the wisdom of truth, right? Mm-hmm. Addressing it truthfully.
And then whenever he approaches Roshi, he's literally asleep. He's just resting and has no comment. He's just unconscious.
Right. I think he is he does say he slept well.
Yeah, he says I rested well, yeah.
I'm not sure if...
I don't know if it's unconscious, but he's not. Right. He's definitely not engaging on that level.
No. Right. Plus, I mean, he doesn't want to give away who he is anyways.
Mm-hmm.
But right, I think it is significant to say, to mention what Goku says, that he can just try his best. I also think it's a little bit humorous that the announcer here, who we haven't really talked about what the announcer represents, but the announcer here, and he has glasses too, he kind of represents let's say the herald archetype, right?
The crier sort of. Yeah.
And so he here is trying to fill in the void of really Jackie Chun stonewalling him and Goku giving him a non-answer.
Mm-hmm. Well, he has to have something to say, but the reality is that this is a very honest fight. The fight is what everyone is there for, and so there's not a lot of fluff.
There's not much more to say. Exactly. This is the, let's say, storytelling representation of there's not much to say. Let's just get on with it. And I also do want to mention before we move on that not Jackie Chun, Krillin and Yamcha think for a minute that now that they know that Master Roshi is not Jackie Chun, Goku might stand a chance.
Mm-hmm. I also wrote that down because Yamcha remarks, now that they quote unquote know that it's not him, I think I think that's important because it it highlights why it can't be Roshi that they're fighting against. They need it to be an unknown quantity so they have the potential for victory. If they knew they were fighting against Roshi, there's the possibility of the demoralization and the contextualization of what the fight would mean. You would go in thinking as Goku that maybe you don't have as much of a chance. Now, Goku wouldn't think that. Krillin would definitely think that, right? Would get to his head and he wouldn't be able to try his best, right? So the lack of Roshi being present right here and being an unknown quantity is like Goku needs to confront that chaos.
Well, to be more specific, right? Because Roshi is the spiritual ancestor. He's he who points out the flaws when you've gone into that unknown, which is what happens literally to Bulma in the very first time he meets her. And so they don't know if that is this person yet, right? They've seen him point out the flaws of Krillin and Yamcha. Doesn't necessarily mean that he is the ancestral spirit, which is what they think Roshi is, right? And we come to learn that Roshi has his limits, of course. But right now in this hierarchy, we see that they think Roshi is the spiritual ancestor and he will point out all flaws to infinity, let's say.
Well, it has to be an embodiment of that spirit and not the spirit itself that they're coming up against too, because it's like transcending that spirit or transcending the spirit of your master is not the same thing as beating the competency of your master in a sort of an abstracted way, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And so they think maybe Goku can win. And I think it's important not only for the character drama, but I think also having the audience know that he is the spiritual father and he will point out Goku's flaws. But there are things that we know about Goku as viewers that Roshi does not know about Goku. And especially since his tail has grown back, we as the audience don't know who's going to win this.
Right.
So it's set up in different layers. Like not only the characters not know, but the audience doesn't know either.
Yeah, I think it's important that they don't know too.
If you expect it to be a normal anime, right? Like Goku would win.
Well, naturally. And if it was a normal anime, the main character would have this awesome winning fight against Pilaf at the end of the first season, which is not what happens.
It is not. Yeah, it's not a good defeat.
Yeah.
So, right. I think we've covered our bases there. Let's go ahead and see the beginning of the fight. And this is our thumbnail. The thumbnail. Thank you, Brok, for creating. Has the two. Are they on fire already, or are they just?
They strike a pose, and then they get superimposed in front of the fire.
Here it is.
Yeah.
And then they turn into fire.
And then they become fire.
Right, exactly.
And that's another representation of what I was saying, where it's like, you don't know. Like, they don't, it's an unknown quantity. They have to confront what they don't know. Because we see Roshi doubting whether or not he can win the fight. He doesn't know, right?
Well, and he doesn't know because he acknowledges that with Goku's tail grown back, he doesn't know how powerful Goku is. Now, this is also specifically a part where we'd probably want to talk about Goku's tail because...
the first move of this fight, he has to use his tail because he...
But let's go ahead and say what happens. So the fight starts, Roshi charges Goku, and Goku dodges. Roshi flies up and kicks him and sends him flying off the edge. He thinks he's won. The whole crowd thinks Goku's lost. But Goku, using his tail as a helicopter, is able to fly back to the ring.
Yeah, I love the part where he's flying through the air and thinking to himself. He's like, I can't use the Nimbus. How do I get out of this situation?
I got one here. Yeah. It'll cycle through.
Well, I think it's funny because it's like, there's this calm, contemplating thing that happens where Goku's like, he's always in that state of trying to adjust and take in the new information and digest it and turn it into something that is forthright and can overcome what he didn't expect or what he didn't know. And so he's in the situation where we don't know at the time, but he realizes that he has multiple ways out of this, and he decides to use this one instead of the Kamehameha wave.
Right, and I was thinking about this as well, to be concise with what I think the tail represents, and that is Goku's propensity to be a monster,
Mm-hmm.
and specifically because of his celestial heritage, right? That's why he transforms into what he transforms into. It's
Mm-hmm.
because his path is the way it is, and because he's already achieved dominance over such hierarchies that he's even able to tap into this. It's kind of like the idea of when Gandalf says that he would take the ring in order to do good, but through him it would wield a power more terrible than you could ever imagine, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that idea.
Well, I think it's important too to point out that.
So far, I will say we will analyze more, but
Mm-hmm.
so far that's what it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's also important to point out that this is the reason that they said he couldn't use the Nimbus again. It wasn't. I mean, there's a logical reason. It's like, oh, you can't do it again. The reason they said that was so that this could happen, so that we could point out that against Roshi, the Nimbus isn't really sufficient. It's not the thing that's going to save him from the fact that Roshi can just immediately push him out of the ring.
Well,
right?
Roshi is already. I mean, he owned the Nimbus.
He got
right?
it from Roshi.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, being pure of mind and heart doesn't necessarily suffice.
It's
in
not
this case.
enough,
Yeah.
right? It's not enough to. Here it is.
I love it.
It's not enough to defeat, let's say, Roshi here.
Mm-hmm. It's something he inherited from him, right? And so
Right.
it's not even. It can't factor into this victory.
So let's talk about Goku flying back, and he actually flies over the crowd as well and waves to them, right? So this meaning, right? Goku's not going to get knocked out of the hierarchy because, and this has happened. This is kind of a trope, I would say, in fiction, is the heritage of the, like, even in Harry Potter, the
Yeah.
heritage of the hero saves them, and in this instance, right, we have both heritage and shadow combining to be able to save Goku from being knocked out of the hierarchy.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to the Force, in the original Star Wars
And-
trilogy, where Luke,
Well, and what
It
does
has
it
the
do?
he's inherited that power that lifts him up, right?
Lifts, yeah, exactly, lifts him up, or
Well, it
lifts
elevates him
objects, right.
above just the standard mode of being. And I think that this happens a lot in classic, like, mythological stories that, you can look at it as absurd or arbitrary or whatever, but I don't think it is. The lineage aspect of it is calling back to something more pure or real.
And it also, it's not
embodied,
calling to, like, an elitist view of the world. Everyone has that celestial set of parents, right? The
Mhm.
spiritual, ancestral.
Yeah, it's,
parents.
that idea that we're all children of Adam. It's like we all have a common humanity that runs
Mhm.
deep all the way back to the beginning of time, and so there's no end to the amount of wisdom you can gain from that, and how much it could elevate you if you were to really understand it and integrate it. And this is an instance of that integration, right? He's integrating it to allow him to fly, and he doesn't do it. Does he ever do it again? I think that specifically being used here as a one-off is kind of the evidence of what it is, and it's sort of representing that in this case, right, specifically in this fight against Roshi, this is something that insulates Goku against just being forced out of competition in modes of being. It's like, no, I have this. Like, this will stop you from being able to by default defeat me. It's the same thing we saw whenever he leans back on his tail. He catches himself with his tail, right?
Oh yeah, you're talking about in the fight with Namu.
Right, same thing.
Uh,
I think there's a lot of similarities actually to the fight with Namu in this one.
Yeah, but this is a whole.
This is taking it to another level,
Right.
obviously.
But so what I was gonna say is, here Roshi still represents that spiritual father, pointing out the flaws. Right, he points out this flaw in Goku, and that was his overconfidence. Right, which his overconfidence was saved by
Mhm.
his heritage.
Yeah, he specifically said that he was careless and he let his guard down because he avoided his attack. And his
Right.
carelessness is what allowed him to have to lean back on that.
Right, and that's the thing. The let's say truthful acceptance of his predicament, which is what he does. He says,
Mhm.
"What am I gonna do now?
Yeah,
Can't
why
use
am
the
I in this
King
situation?
Tone."
How can I get out of it, right?
Right, and do I want to expend the energy of the Kamehameha wave? That's the other
Mhm.
thing that we kind of get to at the end of it. And Roshi is amazed here. He really thought he had it all tied up, but not so.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, I think that's basically exactly what I typed in my notes too. It's I think his flexibility, his ability to adjust and integrate that new information is really tied into his tail, right? Especially after we saw like his fight with Namu. And so this is just a better representation of that, I think.
In his tail is that gateway, like we've said,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's a little complicated, but yeah, definitely saves him here, and it uplifts him so he can stay in the hierarchy. Let's say.
Yeah.
And so then, after Goku gets back, he says he could have used the Kamehameha wave, but he didn't want to. He wanted to save it for last. I think that's what he says exactly.
Yeah, he says that he wanted to save it for a big finish. And so it's funny because that Roshi takes offense to that and he's like, "Oh, you really think you were just going to beat me with my own move?" And Goku's like, "What do you mean your move?" And so I love this motif of speaking the truth being tied into the Kamehameha because Roshi keeps accidentally outing himself around the Kamehameha.
Specifically around the Kamehameha.
Yeah. Like he keeps doing it. He can't help it. And it's kind of funny because I think that ties into why this the first beam struggle in the series ends up the way that it does, and it doesn't just defeat Goku, right? I think that that's kind of tied in. This isn't Roshi's Kamehameha, right? This is Jackie Chun's Kamehameha.
Well, we do see Roshi's Kamehameha
Right.
later in this
This
fight,
isn't it, though.
but this is not it, no. Roshi's Kamehameha would have blasted Goku away.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's say specifically why. Because Goku challenges him and says, "No, that's Roshi's." And he's like, "Oh, I misspoke." And then Goku's still challenging him, and he says, "Well, you..." He says essentially that he's made improvements on it. And Goku's like, "Oh, well, what kind of improvements?" And he's like, "You couldn't handle it anyway." And I love it because it's like, you can't handle the truth. So he's
And
literally
Goku's like,
saying you can't handle the truth.
Yes, I can.
Goku goes, "Yeah, I can." So Roshi has to put on this whole song and dance where he's like, "I do these 3 things." And so he like balances and then he stretches and then he does aerobics, looking like he's praising the sun, right?
Yeah.
And then he like centers himself and he's like, "All right, now I'm going to use the real Kamehameha against you." And they have a perfectly matched attack, which I think is really significant to what's going on in this fight, right? Because Goku's blind spot in this fight is that he can't see Roshi for who he is. He keeps being tricked, right? He keeps falling for the disguise, and he doesn't know really what he's up against over and over and over. And the irony of it is that this makes Roshi's Kamehameha weak enough that it doesn't just defeat Goku.
Well, also Roshi's inability to put himself into the world at this very moment because he's not himself, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
It's a dishonest Kamehameha wave, right?
And it's, yeah, obviously not going to be as powerful. This is not the Kamehameha wave that took out Fire Mountain, as you can see.
Yeah, and I also kind of like to look at what's going on with Jackie Chun. Like, he's almost a construct. He's like a projection of all of the competency that you could imagine Roshi would have to come up against. And,
Well,
and
he's
Goku's
also
so forthright that he hits it head on and matches it, right?
kind of also that's almost stereotypical master, right? Kung Fu master from
Well, he's
the,
literally
the
named
old
Jackie
movies,
Chun,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean, he dresses like it, right? He's more, let's say, proper. I mean, he's a little lecherous, but he's less so than Roshi. Roshi does some crazy stuff.
Roshi's special, right? He
Roshi
doesn't
is special.
fit into the proper hierarchy, right?
And so everyone, by the way, so they do have their beam struggle. They each launch their Kamehameha wave, which is like their truth beam, their Logos beam, let's say. And they clash, and they are equally powered, and it explodes. It blows them both back, right? And I guess that's more or less to say that creating order out of chaos, like weaponized against each other, especially if it's, let's say, evenly matched, is going to, let's say, create, what am I trying to say here? The potential of order creation out of chaos that each one exhibits is enough to inspire awe in the other, blowing them both back. That's what I wanted to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that ties in nicely with why it's matched, right? And it's not a blowout. It's not like, Goku got humbled by this attack. It's like Goku's doing what he's supposed to do.
Right. And as far as he knows what he's supposed to do.
Hmm.
So everyone's amazed. Like and it lights up the whole area, right? It brings order. It's a vision of order to
It's
everything.
enlightening.
Yeah, it enlightens all the crowd, everyone in there, and even the enlightenment is enough to, let's say, blast back Goku and Jackie Chan.
Hmm. And Roshi, he makes a comment to himself. It took him 50 years to master
Oh
that
yeah,
Kamehameha. And then he says, "I'll have to think up a strategy during the commercial." In the original translation,
That's the next one. I think we have that in the next one.
which is great. That tongue-in-cheek humor is better in the original translation. I love the English dub, I really do, but some of these jokes they don't come through at all.
I'm really starting to like the sub a lot.
Yeah, the sub is pretty strong. A lot of our analysis comes out of the sub.
Yeah, I mean, we will say that some of it does come out of the
Well, the
dub.
spirit
There are
comes
some
through for
good things
sure.
in the dub.
Yeah.
But then again, this was made after Dragon Ball Z. So then what happens is, yeah. Then what happens is Roshi uses the after image technique against Goku. I mean, they just matched Kamehameha waves, right? He already showed him he's not going to knock him out of the ring.
Mhm.
And so now he's going to test him with his projection of himself. He's going to project himself and see if that can trick Goku into being deceived, let's say.
And it does deceive him because he does it twice.
Yes. He
So
doesn't do what is expected. But
he escalates it within the same framework, right?
and then he tries Goku, who actually is fine from that attack, not really too affected, decides to do it against Master Roshi.
Mm-hmm.
And Roshi, underestimating Goku, maybe not, I would say too, maybe not confronting this obstacle with truth, thinking that Goku would mix it up, is deceived because Goku does 3.
Yeah, it's because Goku gets the spirit of the attack, right? And not the literal letter of the attack.
And he actually says it, "You're all one pattern, huh, old man?" And he literally spells it out that this is a pattern. He's recognizing the pattern.
So he gets a new pattern out of it.
Yes.
And then he literally says, "All right, I'm going to do it too." And then Roshi's like, "Oh, you're always with the monkey see, monkey do."
Yes. Yes.
which is great because this is literally what's happening. He is taking in the new information, creating order out of it, finding a pattern, and as soon as he sees that the pattern, as soon as he sees that the pattern isn't that it's just the same thing over and over, that it can be extrapolated upon, he does that, right? He takes on that mode of being immediately and surprises Roshi that he's able to do it.
And actually, the after image technique becomes one of the staple of Goku's repertoire in Dragon Ball.
Mm-hmm.
He kind of stops using NZ, but
and I think it kind of functions as a metaphor for Goku's complexity, right?
Mhm.
Because Roshi thinks that he's very simple. He's like, "Oh, okay, if you're just going to copy me, then I can anticipate what you're going to do." He doesn't understand that
Goku's not copying you.
That Goku wasn't copying. He's just integrating and being forthright, and he's trying to push himself. Every time he does something, he's trying to push himself forward. So, if you show him a pattern, he's going to push it. And that's how complex he is. And time after time, people are surprised by that.
Right. And I think that covers pretty much the after image technique there. I really like that pattern recognition, though, because I think that, too, is part of, let's say, wisdom, that holy knowledge, right? Recognizing those patterns in anything, really.
Yeah, just not being deceived by the letter of the thing. And that's kind of the theme of what's happening there.
Right. And so that's pretty much the after image technique there. Goku overcomes it and is able to see through Roshi's projection, basically, and improve upon his own technique. Again.
And I don't know if it's in these clips, but it results in him being able to fall down out of the sky on top of Roshi's head and hammer him on top of the head.
Yeah, it's almost like it's almost like God. It's almost like God.
Yeah.
No, but it is almost like a what do I even want to say? Like a eureka moment, like hitting you over the head with it, basically. Like, no, this is the pattern. Obviously, it's not that I'm copying you.
Well, this
Bam,
and
right?
it hurts Roshi's ego,
That's precisely, yeah, that's precisely it. And he comes back with, how dare you strike your teacher like
hmm
that, right?
which outs himself again,
Yes.
right? And so this theme of him repeatedly outing himself is funny because that's really what this fight, at least in the first part, is all about. It's testing Goku to see how well he can see. And he's seeing Jackie Chun, but he's not really like seeing in like the capital S, seeing, perceiving, understanding, right? Sort of sense. And but he's starting to, because what happens this time is that Roshi says, "How dare you hit your master on the head like that?" And Goku's like, "You're not my master." And he's like, I got confused." He doesn't even have a good excuse this time. And Goku starts questioning him, and he says, "I know what's going on with you. You must be related to him." And in the style that we've seen from Jackie Chun so far, he immediately has the prop on hand to back up someone's misconception about him. And he pulls out a scroll and shows a fake family tree
I'm
showing
his cousin.
that he's his cousin, right? And it reminds me of how he has the wig glued on and he's got the perfume. It's kind of like anytime somebody thinks, "Oh, he's probably not Roshi because of this," he's like, he integrates that immediately and uses that against their perception. And so he's ready to at any given time, right? It's magical.
Definitely, definitely. And so I think, hold on. Okay. 1 second.
Well, that ties into what's going to happen next as well, which is that Roshi uses his next technique against him. And it is another continuation of that projected,
This is what I was trying to play.
yeah, there it is. He continues the process of escalating this sort of deception towards Goku to see if he can continually be tricked and see him for who he is, right? Because I think part of Goku overcoming this part of the hierarchy, this final step of the hierarchy, which he's not supposed to, is understanding and then transcending the spirit of the father in a sense, right? And he's not ready to do that.
Or rather, in a way that redeems Roshi, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, Roshi can't really be redeemed yet by Goku.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, here we see Roshi starts doing drunken boxing, the technique drunken boxing, and it is a deceptive technique, right? And it fools Goku because he's not able to read his opponent like normal. He's never been drunk, right? It takes something that Goku can't do, right? First, he says, all right, I'm going to just charge you and see what you're made of. He almost knocks Goku out of the ring.
Well, I want to
Goku
say
comes
first
back.
what he does. He says, "Hey, are you okay?" And he leans and falls into him, and he's playing on Goku's earnest, forthright goodwill and manipulating it. So, like, this is Goku's blind spot.
I was getting to that. I wanted to just kind of recap what he's done so far. So he almost knocks him out of the ring. Goku comes back, right? And then Goku, let's say, belittles the Kamehameha wave. He says, all right. So he challenges them on the Kamehameha wave. They both enlighten each other, let's say. Then he challenges them on the afterimage technique.
Mm-hmm.
Can you see this deception? Goku can. He excels at that. And so it's things that Goku can know and duplicate. This is something that he can't do. So this is kind of we are climbing.
Can you
hierarchy.
fight against something you can't integrate?
Right.
So he puts Goku in this situation where he does not have the capacity to beat this attack the same way that he beat the last attack. So Goku is totally stumped by it. And it's actually a good little chunk of the episode right here of Goku trying and failing over and over to get a good hit in on him and stop getting tricked over and over, right? And they say explicitly in the episode, Master Roshi says, "This is something you can't beat because you wouldn't know what it's like to be drunk."
And Master Roshi can project himself in this state of being. So we've had a change of state of being now that Roshi's brought in. Is this something you're able to master? Can you, Goku, project a, let's say, more rudimentary form of your own being? Can you change beings, right? So
Can
we've
you
seen,
act?
yeah. Well,
Because
in a way.
I think the acting aspect of it is something that really beats Goku because it's a dishonesty. You remember, take it back to season 1, and they needed him in the Oolong episode to pretend to be a girl, and he just like immediately pulls his pants down and pees. Like he doesn't understand putting on an act because he's so integrated and honest and like grounded, right? And so it's really difficult for Goku to act. I don't think that because he doesn't know how to act, he doesn't know how to fight against the act as well.
He doesn't know how to be anyone but Goku, let's
Exactly.
say.
Well, and we're seeing a low resolution version of that with the projection and the after image technique, right? But it's not a different mode of being. It's just sort of a thinking ahead sort of metaphor, right? It's being ahead as far as like, oh, why don't you try to fight me on this front? Oh, I'm already past you, right?
Right.
This is a bit different.
And to say it's like I was saying about the after image technique, is can you handle this deception, the Kamehameha, can you handle this truth? This is, can you change the way you are?
Well, I like that actually. It's like, can you handle a deceptive truth? Right?
Yeah.
Because you can be told truth from a deceptive angle, and it's kind of like, are you embodied and truthful enough and forthright enough to not be defeated by that? And so Goku says, okay, well, I'm not going to be defeated by that because I'm the real deal, right? But being the real deal, like being embodied, being legitimate, authentic, whatever, is something that can be manipulated. And that's why the first thing that Roshi does here is he kind of stumbles up against Goku and he like falls, and Goku catches him, because it's like playing on, you don't know how not to be authentic, right?
Right. And so the first act that Goku does correctly is something atypical of his mode of being. That's the first step from it, right? And he runs, and Roshi says, running, that's so atypical of you, which is true.
Yep.
And then Goku's standing there, and he's wondering if he's crying. He doesn't know what's going on. And what's happening during that time is Goku has decided that he is going to put an honest project. He's going to return to Monkey and put an honest projection. An honest projection on, let's say, the whole drunken boxing idea. He's going to take that concept. He's going to make it Goku's, and he's going to bring order to it and put it out into the world.
Well, it's the inverse of the Kamehameha wave, right? Which was a dishonest truth. This is like an honest deception. It's he's able to tap into a mode of being that isn't his current, let's say, like, logical mode of being, that's still true to him, right? And so it's such an interesting thing for him to be able to do. So he's learned the lesson here because he's figured out a way to act while being true to himself.
And it's actually able to overcome Roshi such that he doesn't know how to respond.
It's something that, I mean, he's shook. Like, even in that frame, we were just looking, he's like, wait, what?
And so Goku's changed his mode of being so much that Roshi's not even able to. And I mean, Roshi was able to hit him normally earlier in the fight. But this is such a, like you said, honest deception that Roshi, being Jackie Chun, is not going to be able to overcome it.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because in the process of Goku getting the jump on him by doing this, he does the same thing that he did to Namu, which is he trips him with his tail, right? And I think it's essentially the same thing that's going on with Goku being able to trip up Roshi with his tail, that he as when he did it with Namu. It's kind of like something that Roshi and Namu have in common is that neither of them are necessarily in this tournament for themselves. They're in it for an extracted sort of selfless goal that's not embodied in the way that Goku's embodied. And Goku's reason for being in this hierarchy is for the sake of contending with the hierarchy. And the purity of that mode of being is something that if you're not in it for that reason, that tail's going to trip you up.
Well, and I would say not only is the tail going to trip you up because of that, but the propensity of Goku to adapt and integrate is something that is astounding, especially at this point. I want to say that he only trips Master Roshi up at this point is because he's developed to that degree. He couldn't trip him up earlier on because he hadn't integrated enough. Now he's integrated this pattern that he could barely even recognize from drunken boxing and adapted it to his own Goku technique, let's say. And that is so astounding that it trips Master Roshi up and allows Goku to take what looks like somewhat of a win in this round.
Right. He makes a fool of Roshi in this part too. It's not as simple as like he just gets a hit off on him.
Like that there, right?
He lays him out. He scratches his face up. He kind of makes a joke out of him the same way that he was just made a joke out of, right? And I think that that's just a level of him integrating that pattern as well. He understands it and can use it to sort of, by doing this, you diminish the mode of being of the other person a little bit, because it's like, how do I want to say it? It's kind of complicated, but it's in the face of the mode of being that Goku is inhabiting. It's almost like wrestling, right? It's like
everything is wrestling.
Well, it's he's real, but he's fake, right? He's embodying a spirit that's bigger than him by being, Monkey King, let's say, because that's what he's trying to do right here. He's trying to be the monkey at the top of the hierarchy, and so that is something that Jackie Chun, who's sort of a projection, right? He's like a construct in that way. It kind of makes a joke out of him because of the purity and like the authenticity of what Goku is.
Right. I think what you're trying to say is that Goku's pure pursuit of the hierarchy makes light of Jackie Chun's false pursuit of the hierarchy.
Mm-hmm. Well, you could call it false because really what he's doing is he's trying to protect the integrity of the top of the hierarchy rather than obtain or sort of interface with it in the same way, right?
Right, but that's what Master Roshi's doing. Jackie Chun is not doing that.
Well, Jackie Chun's playing.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. That false pursuit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, actually.
So, that is going to bring us to kind of the end point of this episode.
There are a couple of things that I want to kind of talk about as an addendum, just because I didn't want to really disrupt the flow of kind of talking through what happened in the episode.
Hold on, before that,
sure.
Let me wrap up here. So, Goku uses his Mad Monkey technique to like blow back Roshi up. Let's say, because I don't want to make YouTube mad. And so Roshi gets up and he starts doing some hand motions and things, and that's actually where the episode leaves off.
He tells Goku, "You've already lost.
You've already lost," and we see light come out of Roshi's eyes. Right?
They start glowing.
They start glowing,
or like orange.
Orange, yeah, I would say orange.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that Roshi's nowhere near at his limit.
Yeah.
Roshi has more experience, right? More wisdom to test Goku with which to test Goku. Yeah. And so that does kind of bring us to the end. So I guess we can talk addendums at this point.
Well, so one thing I wanted to talk about a little bit more is the drunken boxing, if we can switch into that, since we're going to be talking about that. I have a short quote that it really rings true for what Roshi's doing and kind of what he's representing in a grander scheme of this fight and as a character. And it stood out to me when I was watching this episode, so I wanted to go ahead and seed this in. This is a short quote from Daryl Sharp. He's a Jungian scholar, and he's got a book called The Jung Lexicon. And so talking about the archetype of the Senex, which is Latin for old man, And Jung calls that the archetype of the old man, the Synex. So he said, the quote is, the puer's shadow is the Synex, Latin for old man, associated with the god Apollo, disciplined, controlled, responsible, rational, and ordered. Conversely, the shadow of the Synex is the puer, related to Dionysus, unbounded instinct, disorder, intoxication, and whimsy. And that sort of intoxication and whimsy and unbounded instinct, I think, represents Roshi really, really well, right? Specifically, I think it describes a lot of how Roshi manifests all of these things, right? That, and the intoxication really stood out to me this time because it's like, of course, right? That whimsical shadow nature of Roshi as that archetypal old man, because what we're contending with a lot of the time in the beginning of the story is the shadow of Roshi, right? Being the blind king, master, old man sort of archetype.
And his shadow, let's say, interfering with the plot.
Right. And also just interfering with his ability to take that responsibility, right? To ultimately claim that archetypal responsibility of the Synex. And I'm saying puer here. Obviously, we have a character named Puer. It's not a coincidence, right? We talked a little bit about that before. And I think it just lends more credence to kind of what we're talking about on this archetypal analysis, right? Because look at how easily Yamcha was just swatted away before, right? Being this spirit of the puer whenever he came up against Roshi on this hierarchy. Because it's like,
But
Roshi's got so
the
much
shadow
experience.
of the puer is the Synax?
Yeah, it's shadow. Don't want to go too deep into like terminology as far as like the shadow integration aspect of it, but being sort of the unintegrated opposite side of it. But Roshi's much older than Yamcha. He has much more experience with the puer, and Yamcha's he's still embodying the spirit of the puer. He's this immature, masculine, up-jumped, but ultimately it's like, oh, this is something that Roshi is completely familiar with because he's almost like the puer eternus manifested in the Synex archetype, right? Because he can't integrate, he stays blind, right? And so it's like, oh, like Yamcha's mode of being is nothing to Roshi because he contends with it every day because he just stays in that state, right?
So basically, what you're wanting to bring up is Yoshi. What the fuck?
Yeah, that's what I want to
Roshi.
bring up.
You're talking about Roshi's whimsical nature as the shadow. So you're saying that Roshi's shadow is embodied here in Jackie Chun?
Yeah, I would say that shadow manifests itself in his
Because
his behavior, and especially in Jackie Chun, because it's almost like he's projecting this character, and it's like, okay, this ego construct character that he's projecting out there is made up of all of these things, and he can't help it because he isn't fully integrated as the Synex. And I could go further and say specifically his relationship to Turtle is similar to the relationships that we see like with Yamcha and Puer, Bulma and Oolong, right? Because the voice of God is disintegrated from him. He's not integrated, and because he hasn't integrated that spirit, that true like father spirit, right? It's symptomatically just overly indulgent, overly whimsical. He can win acting intoxicated, right?
No, I mean, we've already talked about how he's disintegrated that
Right.
way. I'm just trying to figure out here what exactly you're trying to say that Roshi's doing here. So this is his whimsical side?
Yeah, I'm just saying that's why he's so good at this. It comes naturally to him. Like, of course, like knowing that, of course, it would be the drunken boxing technique, right? Because that is that's manifestation of that thing, right?
Well, I think too it's significant to say that Gohan used it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it is that well, I think we need to establish why whimsy is something that's adopted by this spiritual figure.
What do you mean?
So you said, I mean, you were quoting from a book. So, I mean, why is that though?
Why is it that
it's
it manifests
whimsical?
as whimsy? Well, that's the childlike propensity, right? To be whimsical, to be carefree, right? Because we can say that Roshi's overly carefree, right? He is not serious enough.
Well, this
He
is
doesn't
low
take
stakes for him. I mean,
Yeah.
He gets serious, which is why I think he's a very interesting character. We get to see that later on.
I'm just talking about specifically like kind of the first half of Dragon Ball, right? This And he stays in that state willfully later on to continue to embody that spirit, right? But I'm talking like post Dragon Ball into Z and stuff. He still stays lecherous, let's say, right? But that being an aspect of his archetype is why we see it over and over, and that's why he did
Because
the Bond Festival
I was more
dance and
thinking
like,
here. Right. The Bond Festival dance is a good example of it, but I
mhm.
was more thinking here this is an alternate mode of being because the Bond Festival dance is still just Jackie Chun, right? But this is Jackie Chun when he's drunk. It's a further extrapolation of that idea,
Yeah,
and it is whimsical, but at the same time, the point of it is to show, let's say, Goku the pattern of altering modes of being
yeah.
and the utility of altering
Yeah,
modes
I
of
think it's
being.
both. I don't think that the reason is to tell people that this is the archetype. What I'm saying is like it's so concise because it ties those archetypes into what they're talking about, so it really resonates with people, right?
Hmm.
And one thing that I totally forgot to mention about this part too is that Goku says that the drunken boxing technique was actually, you mentioned just now, it was Gohan's, that he knew that Gohan used it and that it was dirty for Roshi to surprise him with it, right?
But it's actually significant as well because Goku still is not able to overcome it the same way.
Well, that's what we're talking about because it's the spirit of the father, right? It's like, oh, this is something that my my other father figure had, and I know that, but I still can't do it, and so it actually spells it out in that way as well, right?
Sorry about that.
But I mean, what do you think about that fact, right? I don't think it's arbitrary that specifically it brings up here that it was something that Gohan had used as a technique, and that Goku knows that.
Well, like I was saying, I think it's significant because, or I think even they mention it because Goku's, let's say, earthly parents or earthly
Mhm.
paternal figure, Gohan was also able, and we will see that later on when we actually meet Gohan, um, to alter his modes of being as well, and
Mm.
he actually, because I mean, think about his iteration later on, right?
Right.
And so I think that that's kind of an extrapolation of it, but I do think in a way it is, to show the misdirection, right? I don't know what I'm trying to say with this.
I feel like we're on
What
the
was your
edge of it.
question?
Well, it's just it. I don't want to say that it's just foreshadowing
Well,
necessarily that he
what
mentions
exactly
it
is
here.
your
That
question? That what do I think about?
yeah, just that was all. Just why do you think that it specifically is mentioned in this episode that Gohan knows it? That it was something that Gohan used, and like for Goku to recognize it, so he knows about this move. It's not
Well,
surprised by the
I
move. He
mean,
still can't beat it though.
we've established too that Gohan taught Goku play.
Uh
And
huh.
this is just a further extrapolation of acting play, like you were saying earlier. It's altering your mode of being such that it changes who you are instead of just playing rock paper scissors, where it just changes
You're
what you're
playing a
doing.
role, right?
Right.
Well, I think that's a good way to put it because we can frame it like Goku lost Gohan early because of everything to do with the Great Ape, right? And so you could say, well, maybe if Gohan was around for a little bit longer, then this would be something that Goku would have been taught by his earthly father, right? And could have integrated further because it's something that you learn from those that are older than you, right? How to act and how to, because that's what kids do, right? In play, they take on a role in like playing house and stuff, right?
Hmm.
But Goku's not socialized like that, and he lost Gohan at a young age.
Right. And so I think that's another reason why they bring it up because perhaps, yeah, it is a lesson too that Goku can't overcome because, it's not something he learned from Gohan, and he's got to learn how to do it right now, and he
From
actually
a
does.
spiritual father.
Yeah, from the spiritual father. Well, and learning from the spiritual father meaning the spiritual father points out the flaws that you will inevitably be aware of by encountering the unknown.
Right. Call back to, let's say, Ox King, right? What he does is observes your flaws and draws attention to them, right? And through that forthright encountering and confronting of your own flaws, you can integrate and go beyond them. And I think that that's why it, in this case, right, it's like a father figure that imparts this growth onto Goku.
Well, that's why it always is. Every mythological story will have some deep-seated ancestor within that nest of the unknown, because that's exactly what happens. The ancestor will point out the flaws of a person so that that person can correct those flaws and take that wisdom, the gold, back home
Mm-hmm.
and then change their life for the better from the unknown. And so what we see here is exactly what we're talking about, and that being the knowledge of deceptive modes of being, let's say acting, right? Play through acting. The next hierarchies of that are explained to Goku here, and he's able to integrate them quickly and then create his own version of it. And I think that it's pretty sublime.
Yeah, I think that it just aligns on so many different vectors, right? Because you can take a step back and say, well, let's see what like a Jungian analyst says about this archetype. And then it just starts describing Roshi like verbatim. And it's so interesting that you can say that while staying nested in that framework, while nested in another mythological framework, and it stacks into this really concise message.
Other addendums.
Aside from that, I think that's it. I had a little bit here to say, which I don't know if you'll agree. I kind of just want to postulate on this and see how you feel about it. So Goku's tripping up of Roshi in his sort of monkey state, right? And being able to defeat him, at least in that confrontation, right? Tying that sort of back into this Jungian analysis, it reminded me a bit of Jung's answer to Job, which essentially Jung is postulating there that in the story of Job, which is God tests Job a whole bunch, he flaunts in front of him all of his mighty power and the depth of chaos in the world, right? And says, you need to essentially kneel before me and respect me and just keep accepting my challenges. And Job says, okay. And then even in the face of a cosmic vision from God, he just says, okay, I'll just take that on. God comes out of that with a little bit of egg on his face. And this is the Old Testament God. And what Jung says about that is that because Job is embodied and mortal and has the perspective of that embodied experience, I should say, he comes out as the moral superior to God. That doesn't make sense whenever you're like, well, God's just always morally superior. That is the precursor to the Christ story. The fact that the embodied experience transcends the spiritual hypothetical experience. And I think that we're seeing that play out a bit in this fight as well.
The embodied experience transcends the spiritual experience?
Right, so that's why, like, in the Bible, let's say, it has to be Jesus Christ as the go-between between the Old Testament God and people, because it has to be, there's a higher, it's people realizing that there's a higher moral virtue in staying morally true when the stakes are that you are.
All right, so tie that in here to Dragon Ball.
So what I'm saying is that here, Roshi being the spiritual father, almost godlike figure that has all of this wisdom for Goku, and he's separated from the hierarchy. He's above the hierarchy, right, in the same way that God is. And he's testing Goku over and over. The fact that Goku can get a leg up on him at all, I think, is sort of that same idea, which is to say that, and I'm talking about Goku's tail specifically, because the tail grounds Goku. It's a very, it has to do with that embodied wisdom, right? His connection to the animal side of what it means to be human, right? It's sort of like, you could say, your unconscious mind and all of the wisdom that comes from living within a box almost. It's like, because your experience is defined in this way and it's finite, and you have to be humble, let's say, and you can't just live on forever and eventually figure it out. You have to sublimate yourself. That rises as a higher
You mean
higher,
subordinate yourself?
yeah, subordinate yourself.
Gotta sublimate
yeah, you gotta
yourself.
sublimate.
Turn into gas right away. That's right?
I think
Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, but the idea that because you're embodied and finite and mortal and you suffer, that elevates your mode of being beyond a hypothetical, just like, oh, it's just good, right? It's
Oh,
like good is good,
I
right?
see. I see what you're saying.
So because Goku's in the hierarchy and he's tied into his ancestral lineage and it's embodied, right? It's not the same thing as, let's say, someone who's outside of the hierarchy testing him. And so he can trip up Roshi here. And I think that's why we're going to see it play out the way that it does over the course of the next couple of episodes, right? Because the mode of being that is acceptance of your suffering within that framework and accepting all of the judgment on you and taking it forthrightly and integrating it and just saying, it's almost like in the Christian version, you say to God, I'll take whatever test you throw at me and stay true, like capital T true, right? I'll keep my aim true. That elevates Job in that story so highly that Jung sort of thinks, well, that lowers the ego of the god, the demiurgic sort of god character of the Old Testament. I like that. It's almost like I'm seeing that play out dramatically here because we're talking about the hierarchy, right? And that's what that is. It's sort of like whoever can bear the heaviest weight ultimately wins if they stay true. And that's it. You know, Goku has been bearing these heavier and heavier and heavier weights, right? And I think that's the danger that we're seeing going into the next episode as well.
So what's your question?
It's not a question. I'm just
Okay,
talking about. My question, I guess, is, what do you think? Does that make sense? Do you think I'm on the wrong sort of trail there?
I don't know if I'd necessarily at this point relate Goku to Job.
No, I don't think. I'm not saying that.
But
I'm saying the spirit of that.
yeah. Right. Just let me postulate here for a second. You postulated for a minute. I don't think that's necessarily what you're saying either. But I think there is some truth in what you're saying as far as following the heroic path of creating order out of chaos from whatever is thrown at you, right? Which is what's happening here is holy and is why Goku, let's say, can trip up Master Roshi because Master Roshi is not necessarily on the heroic path here.
True, but I also just kind of wanted to point out that they're not the same status, right? Like Goku's in the hierarchy and Jackie Chun's in the hierarchy, like hypothetically, but he's really Roshi, who's someone who's like at the top of the pyramid but separated, right? And so, like, logically speaking, Roshi should just be able to blow Goku out here, right? It's like Roshi is so experienced and so wise. And
well, I mean, I think we both know that if Roshi did take it serious, if Roshi was trying to win, he could win.
Right, but Roshi can't enter the tournament.
No.
Right?
I mean, even Jackie Chun, I think with our knowledge of the series, I think we would both say that, right? I mean, this is just Jackie Chun toying with Goku.
Yeah, well, it's
him.
play still, right?
Right, and the whole first episode is that.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even with what we know will happen to Roshi,
which I'm not trying to be technically literal. I'm saying the reason that Goku could even get a leg up on him and surprise him, because it's not like he's not faking taking the hits from Goku. He is getting surprised, and we're seeing his internal thoughts like, oh, I didn't think he could do that. Oh, I didn't think he could do that. I didn't think that he was noble and morally true enough to do this, right? And he's surprising the spiritual father above the hierarchy spirit itself. And that's what I'm saying is why his mode of being can stand up to it.
And I think what you're getting at is acting out that and this is what I was trying to say a second ago, but I'm not sure what's different from what you're saying, that the path that the way Goku is, his mode of being, his taking chaos and turning it into order, since it's being acted out.
Yeah, it's embodied, right?
Right. Since it's being acted out and embodied here, Roshi is not encountering chaos and transforming it.
Right, and we're saying that exactly. So that ethic, the ethic of being embodied, and
that's what I said. Yeah. That's what I thought I said the first time.
Well, I think that we can delineate it down, right? The ethic of what Goku is doing, being authentically embodied in confronting this hierarchy, transcends the ethic of the disembodied playing spirit that, let's say, in the Job story, God represents, right? Because the whole premise of that story is that God and Satan take a bet, and he's literally playing with Job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but yeah, I wanted to relate that because I think talking through it, I actually feel like it's a bit. It does represent that spirit. I wouldn't say that Goku's like a Job character. I think there's probably even better
But the thing
instances of
is
that in the story, but
but see, I'm not sure. So I think what you're trying to say is that since Goku and Job are both subordinating themselves to what they believe to be true, right?
authentically and
Then
forthrightly, right?
then that I don't know if that alone puts him on the path of the hero. Like I don't know. It's interesting to hear what you had to say about Job. I mean, I know it's coming from another source, but I'm not sure. I need to read the story, I suppose.
Good Lord, Oleg. The cats do not want us to record today, but we're gonna do it.
They keep eating. How dare they?
2 bites? Let me out of the room. Where's my food? No, I'm not. I think you're just taking it more literally, and I'm just trying to say that
No,
is the
I
spirit of
understand
it
the
is the
spirit.
same spirit. I'm not trying to say
That's
that
what I'm
he's
saying.
Job.
I don't know if it's the same spirit. You because the path Goku's on, does Job encounter chaos and create order out of it? I thought a bunch of bad stuff happened to him.
Well,
And
it's an
his
Old Testament
faith
story.
was tested, right?
Yeah, his faith was tested, and ultimately he got the gold.
But see, I don't think Goku's faith in the hierarchy is being tested here.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm saying I don't think it's the same spirit. Like
Yeah,
Job is being tested on his very idea of goodness, right? Can
Mhm.
anything be good if all this bad stuff is happening to me?
Mhm.
Goku's not in that same test. Goku's ascending. Job was, I would say, descending.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, literally, what's happening, right, is that his his faith in God is being tested over and over and over. And the bet between God and Satan is that, oh, he's going to give up on his faith in me, right? And so God, I don't want to go too deep into this, but God being sort of this ultimate ethic, right? So God not literally being God, but God being sort of like the ultimate ethical point to angle yourself towards, right? And so not succeeding over and over and over, and it being an intentionally acted out thing from sort of uh, an abstracted God element is something that happens to Job, but it's in a lighthearted sense being acted out because it's like the articulation of what that mode of being is being sort of um tested for Goku here. It's like, oh, can you rise to this? Can you rise to this? Can you rise to this? And it's not literally the same thing happening, right? Because Goku's faith in participating in the hierarchy itself, he's not being demoralized in the story, right? But what I'm trying to get at more is that at the end of the story, what Jung's postulation is about it is that that's the precursor to the Christ story because people realized and they were trying to articulate at the time that an embodied ethic transcends the hypothetical definition of good and actually can override and redefine what's good because it's more informed, right? And it's a really complicated, like complex idea, but that idea is present in stories that have the archetype of the self, which I would refer to Goku very much as a self archetype type sort of character, the center, right? Center of being. Because it's this, and the self archetype, we'll see it articulated all the way out through Dragon Ball Z as well. But with that being said, I'm just saying that there's a legitimate, like, authentic challenging that Goku's able to do here because he's able to confront an idea that transcends the hierarchy and come out as somehow still being better than that ethic that transcends the hierarchy.
I loosely see what you're saying.
I don't know if I can articulate it any other way than that.
I mean, what you're saying is the transcending of that which is above the hierarchy by Goku and Job, respectively, even though the journeys that they get there are quite different.
Right. Because the trueness of their ethic, right, is something that even a hypothetical ideal spirit doesn't automatically just beat by saying that it is ideal, right? It's like, no, You can't just say your ideal. There will always be the hero who is confronting chaos and redefining what is real and what is good, and is constantly going to be challenging
Right,
that idea. Right.
which is kind of what I was saying about the embodiment of Goku
Hmm.
here, transcending
Yeah.
Roshi because he's on the path.
Yeah.
I just like that. I'm. That's curious. That's curious.
But I don't want to go any further than that, because Jungian psychology is like the endless rabbit hole. Like, just you keep on extrapolating out and you just never get to the end of it.
Well, I mean, I think we've done a pretty good job
Yeah.
in trying to dissect some of that. But what I mean by interesting is that the spirit of Job, right? The
Hmm.
unbreakable spirit of Job. I can see the relation you're having here with Goku. Um, there's some similarities there for sure,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to make many associations between Job and Goku, because it's not the same. It's just not.
but their
Um,
spirits are the same. You
but
said.
their mode of being, they're accepting, and you can see it in the Namu fight as well, like accepting of
Oh no, unplug your mic. Oh, never mind. Never mind.
the experience of experiencing the struggle of whatever the heavens can bring down on you, and taking it on and standing back up, which is literally how he defeats Namu, right? Is something that, because Goku is he's that self archetype, sort of centered, embodied, true spirit, is something that rivals the heavens ultimately.
Right. Well, I mean, that's what we've been saying. I think
Mhm.
we're talking in circles at this
Yeah,
point.
we are. But I just wanted to
For the
get
last,
there
like,
so that
10 minutes.
we're on the same page. Make sure you understand why I'm trying to say it, because I think it'll come back up
I
as an
think,
idea.
but that's what I'm saying. I think we did establish that like 10 minutes ago. Right?
Okay. Well, then let's move on.
I think we're at the end. All right. So if you liked what you heard, I know we kind of digressed there at the end, but I hope it was somewhat interesting to listen to us parcel out each other's thought processes. But if you like what you heard, please subscribe and give us a like. Be sure to join us next time. Next stream will be Sunday. We do stream Sunday and one random day in the week. We have
Yes.
not determined yet which day it is for next week. But the next episode we'll be covering is number 1, Under the Moon, as far as the English translation of it.
I love that name.
Also, there is one thing I do want to mention really fast, that the name of this has the Kamehameha in it. And that the Kamehameha, the logos encapsulated, is part of the title. But we can talk about that. We'll be talking about the Kamehameha wave next episode as well. So yeah, number 1, Under the Moon. Right?
Number 1, Under the Moon.
Yes.
I was thinking about my analysis. I was like, I want to go this way with it. I'm not sure if this means what I think it does. And then I looked at the title of the episode. I was like, oh, well, I guess that's there it is.
Well, it's going to be a good one, it sounds
Yeah.
like. We both have analyses to share. Remember, I'm your host on the left, Owl.
I'm your host on the right, Brok.
And this was Get the Mic, episode 26.
26.
The grand finals. Good night, everyone.